Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, my friend, I use that term loosely, Dr. Scott Lyons. He is not a real doctor. He's a Somatics doctor, but actually one of the top Somatics people in the world. Really huge, in-depth background. He is a friend of mine, and his background's so rich. He's got so much to offer us, and he's also doing this big Embodied Yoga Summit that's coming up. The Embodiment Conference is sponsoring, so we'll probably talk about that a lot. Scott, joining us from Australia, right?
Yeah.
Welcome. How is it out there?
Australia for the time being. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm a little COVID-y, but I'm also sort of on purpose and happy and laughing still. So life is okay.
Glad to hear it.
So tell us a little bit about your background, Scott. I know we've had you on the show a while back, but just for people that didn't catch that episode, who the hell are you?
I work as a osteopath and a psychologist, and integrate somatics into my practice as well and in my teachings. And actually got introduced to somatics. And for those of you who are less familiar with the term somatics, somatics is the study, let's say, of the living body, and not just the study from the outside perspective, but the study from the experiential sense of who I am and how I am. And I was introduced to somatics at 15, and it sort of became my passion. It was everything I was looking for in terms of this quick and deep process of understanding a felt sense of who I am as a human being, and then became more than just the sense of who I am as a human being, but part of who I am in relationship to the rest of the world and to other people as well, included in that. And that became sort of the lens to which I entered into the field of psychology and the field of osteopathy and the field of ecology that I also studied, and anthropology. And so it really became the background as to how do we gain a firsthand experience of what we're referring to. So if I'm referring to something as nature and talking about it as a third person experience, then I'm already creating this separateness that I am imposing, or that culture has imposed on this idea of interconnectedness. And so part of the field of somatics and being able to apply it to other things, including, as we'll talk about soon, yoga, is this idea of really coming into the experiential sense of something as opposed to the concept or the idea. And in that sense, or in that way, I become more unified and connected through it.
Great. So first person view of the body, experiential view of the body. Yeah. Any schools or things you've loved over the years? Things that I know you've done a lot of stuff, but what has kind of jumped out of you as kind of peak teachers or peak studies?
I would say my mom of somatics is Bonnie Bainbridge Cohn. She helped create, or was the founder of Body Mind Centering, and which I think is one of the sort of more well-known fields of somatics. Studied Hannah Somatics, Alexander Technique, Feldenkrais, Skinner Release Technique. Basically, if it was out there, I certainly explored it. I think that there's just so much technology out there in the process of coming into more relationship with ourselves.
First of all, love Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. Sort of interviewed her for the conference not long ago, just before I started developing COVID symptoms. I was like so worried because she's fairly elderly, and I was there with her and Dan Holland Johnson, who's in his 80s. I was so worried for 10 days, and luckily she was okay. I thought that would be no way to repay her kindness to me. So I'm glad, if you're out there, Bonnie, glad you're doing okay.
I talked to her the other day. She's good.
She's a gorgeous human being, so wise.
Yeah.
She looked at me and she said, Mark, you know how to get in trouble, don't you? I was just like, oh my God, you've seen my entire personality in about 3 seconds.
That, and I warned her about you before you met up with her.
She read my book, which was so sweet for someone of her sort of prestige. She read my entire book. I was like, wow, okay, thanks. Anyway, so as you said, there's such a rich body of knowledge out there now. You can't even get through it in a lifetime anymore, right? Like you could spend your whole life just on workshops, and you maybe living in Northern California or Berlin or something, and you still wouldn't be done. You couldn't study BMC, Skinner releasing, Feldenkrais, Alexander technique. You simply couldn't, even in one lifetime. So what do we do in this situation where, this is episode like 250 something, I think. Like,
wow, Mark.
Have only had a couple of guests on twice, so it's like, and I just got another 250 people I want to interview. I'll probably stop at 1,000, I think. But it's like, how could you possibly make sense of that mess?
Well, I mean, mess is an interesting word. I would call it a massive vernacular of somatic technology. And I think what it comes down to is once you start getting the sense of what does it actually feel like to experience more of yourself, then, the different technologies, we sort of fade away and you are left with the same sort of experience. So all of these are just different maps to the same sort of terrain, which is you. And so I think that if you sample this map and you sample that map and you take a little bit here, and all of them help devise your own map or process towards this development of experience of who you and how you are. So I think that you could dedicate yourself to every somatic modality there is, and that could be super fun and expensive, and or you just you follow where it most speaks to you. Yeah, because I think that's all of, like, I've studied so many, and I'm like, oh, I can really understand the languaging that comes out of the particular experience and the map making of the founders and those teachers who sort of are teaching that founder's work. It really is through their lens of experience, and that will speak to some people, not others. And so you really go study with the people that speak to you really deeply, that like the moment they speak, it just resonates in your cells. And those are the people that are going to offer the technology that you can embody to essentially become more in touch and in contact.
Yeah, years ago I had a plan of like, right, I'm going to study this for 3 years and that for 3 years. And, I had like a 10-year plan of all these things I was going to study. And it just didn't, like, some of them just didn't really sing to my soul. Some of them I just wasn't drawn to. And I found it much richer just to follow. Like, I started getting into Russian martial arts last year. It just wasn't on my plan, but I just was really enjoying it. It was like, okay, this is somehow what I need right now. And it's rich. And I'm learning. I'm looking at all the YouTube videos and reading all the books without having to feel like a chore, just because that's what's alive in me right now. And I've sort of settled on some balance of a little bit of structure and logic, a little bit of top down, like, okay, maybe there's a gap in my knowledge here. Maybe this is a field that would be good for me, even if it's not too super, super great, right? Super appealing right now. And also a lot of just like, well, I'm in love with this, so I'm going to do that every weekend, Yeah.
And, we both have studied aikido pretty intensely in our lifetime. And that's not technically on the list of forms of somatics, but certainly has influenced a lot of the teachers of somatics. Bonnie Bainbridge-Cohen, for example, used to, and Len, her husband, used to teach aikido as part of the body mind centering training. And, you and so many other facilitators I know.
Who did you study aikido with?
I studied with Tina Menchis in New York City, and then a couple people in Northampton, Massachusetts for about 6 years.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it seems to be a price underneath quite a lot of the teachers that are there for various. I think because it's got so much touch in, it's got so much the relaxation plus touch. It's just it builds people's sensitivity to touch. I think you either have to, a lot of aikido or have a lot of lovers. They're your basic option.
So, well, the premise of yield, that's certainly embedded in systems like embodied flow, body mind centering, emerged from aikido, in this process of this deep meeting in order to move with, as opposed to just trying to stop the force or it's the redirection, but the redirection, as you know, happens through the deep meeting.
Yeah, it's connection, listening, and blending. You have to do it in that order. And also this emphasis on centering, this kind of state regulation emphasis, I think there's got become quite popular, quite widespread. I point people to Paul Linden's work, and people probably know Richard Strozzi Heckler, Wendy Palmer, the embodied leadership people, Ginny Whitelaw, Stuart Heller. I mean, these are all aikido people, and they're some of the bigger names in the embodiment field. Well, let's move on to yoga then from aikido. So, I mean, tell us about your connection with yoga.
Well, it's an interesting link, because as we're looking at these forms of movement technologies, or for more specifically martial arts, we're talking about systems that are quite old, and as sort of giving the sort of foundations to what we would call somatics and embodiment. And so as we keep tracking back in the historical processes of development and self-exploration, and we can trace one lineage all the way back to yoga, as this deep process of essentially getting to know the self. And certainly depending on the lineage of yoga, some more than others really focused on the experiential process, or the deep dive into the sense of who am I, and that wasn't just limited to this body or this drop of water in the ocean, but who am I as this drop of water in this ocean of consciousness. And
sorry.
Yeah.
After you.
Yeah, go ahead. Your turn.
Right, after you, Scott.
After you, good sir.
We're not normally this polite when we're not being recorded. So, excuse me. So I was just thinking, like, the term embodied or somatic in yoga. Some people say, well, hey, you don't need to use that. Like, all yoga is somatic. It's always involving the first person experience of the body. Or all yoga is embodied. Like, how would you reply to that? Because when I first created Embodied Yoga Principles, I got that kind of criticism a lot. And sometimes I would respond, well, that would be nice. But what's your response to that?
Yeah, I've already gotten a little bit of feedback from as we're approaching the Embodied Yoga Summit. Feedback with hand quotations. Yeah. I think it's a great discussion point. And I've heard from some people that it's a way of appropriation and colonization to put somatics onto yoga, and which is relatively confusing to me, as some of my teachers are like Christopher Wallace, Sally Kempton. There's people that are coming from the non-dual tantric lineage, and to which like James Morley, these individuals who really talk about how we can actually trace the fundamental elements of somatics back to specifically the non-dual tantric philosophy or non-dual tantric lineage of yoga, where it is
a dialogue, right? There has
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. There needs to be a dialogue. I mean, a lot of these somatic practices are definitely influenced by Eastern practice, definitely. And I really think they should honor that and name that and say who their teachers are. And there has also become unique Western traditions, and they have a lot to offer. And surely some cross-fertilization, which has always happened in human history, surely that's a good thing.
Yeah. We in the first day of the Yoga Summit, we have two panels. Just the first one is what is somatics, what is embodiment, talking about the history of it. And then the second panel that follows it is a process of what is the interface of embodiment, somatics, and yoga. Mm-hmm. Is it where does it come from? Is this a new interface? Is this actually just coming back and remembering and reconnecting to this much older technology just through different languages that we have in the Western process?
Is it just a reconnection to something that may have got lost? So obviously there's certain, I use the word embodied around certain types of yoga now because there's certain types of yoga that are more like athletics. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with a physical, I do pull-ups and go to the gym and lift weights. And
you look great, buddy.
Putting on weight with this sitting around for a minute, I tell you. But thank you, darling. So it's okay to have a physical practice, and that is different from a somatic practice. And who knows how yoga was 500 years ago? Who knows, right? None of us were there.
But thousands of years ago.
Right. None of us know. None of us know. It's probably just manipulation then. But I think it's okay to be using this name to say, hey, there's some yoga now which is more interested in the subjective first-person view of the body, how that affects psychologically and emotionally, and that's okay. And there's other yoga which is more like maybe more transcendental, more kind of esoteric, and other yoga that's just exercise, and that's cool too because we all need to get fit. So why not just place it? Because this bucket term yoga is such a big term now that it does need some differentiation.
Yeah. Well said, Mark. And I think that's one of the things we get to really offer in this is sort of a deep dive into that particular lens of where is yoga, whether it's more of this new conversation or a much older conversation, which I would argue it is, about this deep subjective experience. And I think even in psychotherapy, we can see it so clearly, like where the differential is between, let's say, a cognitive behavioral approach or much more, do this, change your behavior, change your thought, and then you're done, or more of a somatic, which is, look, 96% of you is in this subconscious, is the subconscious. And so what if we enhance the light of awareness and expand what is conscious, or expand what was once subconscious into the conscious realm, and be able to have a deeper, greater conversation. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing where we're looking at yoga. It's like breath and movement and sensation is our first and primary language. That is our primary language. We do not come into the world knowing Spanish or Russian or English. We all come in with the universal language of the felt sense, which is sensation, breath, movement. And from that, we, based on what happens in school or what happens in learning our secondary language, we start to or what happens in our culture, we start to move away from our primary language of the body. And that primary language is the universal language of experience. That is how we experience experience. And so yoga as a process is in many ways, whether it be through the meditation, through the intentionality, through the physical practice, is getting us back to our essential self, which is our essential language of being. And the more we divorce from that essential language of being, the more we are divorced within ourself, within our community, within relationships, within our world, within nature. And so that is
Scott. Boom. That's why we do it. That's why we do it. That's how we roll. I think it's an interesting tension between me and you. We're also more deeply versed in some of the non-dual stuff. I look at things from a slightly more Western point of view, and that's an interesting conversation in itself. Like, are we returning to something in yoga in this practice? Are we actually innovating? Is it some combination, like a new angle on something old? There is a conversation there, so I look forward to that at the conference. What kind of possessed you to do the conference? Because as someone that's put on events like this and, helped with the embodied trauma one and the conscious dance one, I've held the hand of a couple of people doing this as well. And it's not easy, man. So what possessed you?
There's a few things. A good friend of mine, Mark, convinced me.
He's good looking.
He's decent. And I think this conversation has expanded so fast in the last few years. When Tara Judell and I started Embodied Flow 6 years ago, it was not part of the common sort of vernacular language in yoga in the same way that it is much more now.
So, jump in. That's changed so much, hasn't it? Like, I started Embodied Yoga Principles 5 years ago, independently from Tara. I came across Tara's stuff, and she's been very collegiate and friendly. And at first, it was just like me and her. And then I started to see like Julie Martin doing somatic stuff, and then a few more teachers. And even though the term embodied might have been used a little bit, now it's like hashtag embodiment on every yoga festival, embodied this, embodied that, just thrown at the beginning of things to say better than your version, But but back in the day, that was really rare, It was like me and her chatting in Tri Yoga, I remember once, and just going, wow, we felt like we're on the lead edge of something that's a bit unusual, and it's trended since then, hasn't it, for sure? For better,
it's totally trendy. Embodiment's all the rage. and when things trend, it's great, and what that often would needs is just a clear container to refocus the intentionality of this modality or this practice. And
nice. Say that again, because it's really important. So it's something that's got popular. That's a good thing because we like this work, but also it goes in different weird directions. People start
it can get watered down, frankly.
Yeah, like I saw a contact improv festival that was advertised as an embodiment festival, and it was just pure contact improv, and they're just using the word because it was kind of cool. And I thought, that's kind of sad, like, I get it, it's an embodied practice, but it just seemed like a kind of tagging a word on to make it more attractive or something,
And look, none of us own the word embodiment, but we can say from a historic perspective, perhaps where it emerges from.
Yeah.
And I think that's, the gift of this summit is that it's a container to really, narrow in our focus on this sort of orientation of yoga, and specifically of a way of coming back fully into ourselves.
Break to tell you about our program. So as well as the podcast, we have various kinds of online training. So we have the Embodied Yoga Principles online training, as well as in-person training. Embodied Yoga Principles for yogis who want to get yoga off the mat, specialize in the psychology of yoga, unique postures. It's a 5-day training. We have one in Brighton, one in Berlin, and one in Austin, Texas. So if you go to Embodied Yoga Principles, you can find them. Also the online version of the training for people who can't make those dates. Excellent courses. The Embodied Yoga Principles training for the yogis. For the coaches and facilitators, we have the Embodied Facilitator course. This is our flagship course. We offer it in Moscow, also in the UK. A 9-month adventure, a real deep dive into embodiment. It's the biggest embodiment program I do. It could be like movement people who want to work in business more. We have people like dancers and martial arts teachers come to learn more about working in mainstream settings, but also for coaches and trainers who want something really well structured, who want to work on themselves, want to learn practical tools, learn how to work with the body in facilitation. If you can't make EFC, and it is a big ask, there's an online course we run called the Foundations of Embodiment Certification. So if you go to Embodied Facilitator, you'll find the in-person, and then --FEC, FEC, F for Freddie, EC for Charlie, FEC. You'll come up with the Foundations of Embodiment Certification, and also do one-day events all around the world. So I'm just about to do a tour to Slovenia, Berlin, Copenhagen, Brussels, Amsterdam, and Brighton. The Brighton one is £10, which is like $15. So if you're coming from abroad, that could make that affordable. The Brighton one's always like a really big fun one, so that's coming up. Again, go to the Embodied Facilitator course to see all of these events, and we have a little online evening as well if people just want a taster. Again, that's £10. That's a 3-hour thing coming up as well. Embodiedfacilitator.com, embodiedfacilitator.com, and you'll find all those events, or Embodied Yoga Principles for the yoga ones. Okay, so that's the stuff that I sell. Oh, and the book, the Embodiment book. If you want to get my book and learn about embodiment through reading, you can also get the Embodiment book available at Amazon and no good bookstores. So there we go. Excuse the interruption, and back to the episode. can,
that idea of coming home.
It's really important, isn't it, to name some of the big influences, like we mentioned Bonnie earlier, to say, you know, I'll always mention my teachers, Paul Linden or Strozzi, or people that I've trained with, and say, hey, this is really important. We name this lineage here in the West, and also this may be, you know, older kind of things that are related in Eastern traditions and how it relates to that, and just to really place it as we innovate, as people like Tara and myself produce different systems and, you know, things that are out there, to actually place that within a wider, because I feel a bit sad when I see someone saying, oh, I'm doing an embodied thing, and they don't know who Body Language Code is. I'm like, seriously, this is like the grandmother of your work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, you know, it's the same thing. You can get through a 200-hour and have no philosophy, and it's, you know, or very little, and it's doable. And it's, I'm not here to criticize that whatsoever. It's not my prerogative. It might be someone else's prerogative to offer a 200-hour or 300-hour in that way. But what I would say is the philosophy helps us orient, and it gives us clarity of the intentionality. And so in the same way, we are going to be looking at the history and the intentionality of somatics and the orientation of that in relationship to yoga, as well as the intentionality of yoga, specifically through this non-dual tantric lineage. As you know, Harish and Sally Kempton will both actually be teaching in the summit now.
Okay, great. I mean, they're two big names in that field. And talk us through some of the other people who are coming then, maybe some of the more well-known names and some of the ones that would just be nice to give some airtime to, you know, to introduce.
Yeah. So Tar Judel, who is my partner with Embodied Flow. And, you know, I think really revolutionary in so many ways of integrating you know, in an accessible way, I would consider it, several somatic forms and yoga, and integrating things like free movement as part of the practice towards this sense of liberation and resilience. So Rick Hansen, who, if you haven't read any of his books, is a stellar writer on neuroscience and meditation. Richard Miller, who's I just think is one of the sweetest human beings ever, and created iRest, which is a fabulous program, especially working with vets and those who experience trauma. And let me see, Reverend Angel, who is one of my favorite human beings on this planet, and Reverend Angel is just such a beautiful, skillful speaker in the process of how we embody social activism in a way that's it's really about the deepening of our own self-clarity as a way to expand that in our own self-healing, and to then expand that into this social process.
Can you clarify that a little bit more? Like, how does doing some embodied form of yoga help me be clearer about issues of social justice, or be a better activist, or speak to that?
Yeah. Well, and thankfully Reverend Angel will get to speak to it more, but I can say it from more my perspective. So somatics and embodiment, when we look at the sort of more scientific data of it, what it reveals is that people have a deeper sense. They have a more ego strength, meaning they feel better about themselves. They have a more clarity of their physical body, which lends itself to having more resilience and better decision-making processes. Basically, everything that makes them kind of an optimal, kind human being. And when we translate that to, okay, if through the lens of somatics, I heal wounds or ruptures or just, fractures within myself, I'm increasing my ego strength. And in that sense, it's talking about my healthy self-esteem. I have more sense of who and how I am. I speak more from an authentic place. I'm making decisions that are more responsive and less reactive. All of these things that are better suitable for optimal relationship. And what we look at in social justice work is the continual fractures of social and intrapersonal interactions. So how I fracture myself from myself and how I fracture myself from others, so to speak. So that's other communities, other individuals, others of a minority. And all of these fractures, and often, many of them are unconscious or subconscious. And so by bringing more into the conscious dialogue, which is the intention of Somatics, I am able to identify and make decisions that are not reflexive.
Okay.
So that if
there's a piece there about basic robustness, and particularly if people have trauma or oppression-based trauma, that might be extremely helpful. And there's a piece around empathy, and there's a piece just around efficacy, right? Like, am I communicating in a relational way which is going to be heard? Am I robust in myself? Am I able to stand up for what I really believe without feeling too afraid to do that, without being so aggressive I turn everyone off, without being stuck in a freeze response?
Absolutely.
And as there's people better qualified than me, like Ray Johnson is on there as well talking about this, right? She's absolutely amazing on this topic. I really love and respect Ray, so it'd be good to hear her piece. Okay, so we got Reverend Angel Ray Johnson.
Ray will be talking about the history of Cymatics and embodiment, which is one of Ray's many specialties. And we have Eric Franklin, who is a brilliant innovator in Cymatics. If you haven't read any of his 38 books, I highly recommend them. Franklin Method. Yeah. He really took idiokinesis to the next level of using specific imagery-based approaches as the access or the doorway into the experience of ourself. So you might give an imagery like an umbrella of the diaphragm to which you're able to sort of attune into something and then play with that and use that to then come into a more felt sense of what my diaphragm actually feels like. So he studied with Bonnie as well. He's a really stellar teacher. And I think he just, he makes it, for those of us who are very visually oriented, he really created
his work.
There's a real value in his work.
Any yoga teachers?
Oh yeah, tons.
We said Tara. So who else is sort of more yoga?
There's Ashley Turner, Christopher Wallace, or Harish Wallace, Nirali DaCosta, who's a fabulous therapist and yoga teacher, and really looks at the integration of energy medicine and eco-psychology and yoga, and just really well-spoken as well. There's Ali Bogard, who's just a phenomenal speaker and yoga teacher. Marina Kaplan, who specializes in somatic experiencing in yoga. Yoga,
her book Yoga Psychology is really very good. That's required reading for my students. And my good friend Mayan Patel's going to be there as well. He's a sort of free movement yoga teacher by the Embodied Yoga crowd. So I heard I might be teaching. I can't remember what I'm teaching on though, Scott. So do
you are teaching. I think you have to still send me your title. Melai Swan.
Yoga and Stuff by Mark.
Melai is she's an Embodied Flow teacher and teaches a lot of trauma-informed yoga from a somatic approach. There's Simon Borg Oliver,
he's great from Australia. Yeah, he's fluid. We had him on the show. Such a nice guy. Met him in Israel. We both happened to be there at the same time. Really beautiful, flowing, fluid yoga, and just a good person, right, Simon? I like him a lot.
Yeah. I mean, one of the qualifying things for these many of these people are my friends, and they're just good human beings that are not just good teachers.
Right.
And that's such a qualifying thing for me of like, if they are walking the walk. I mean, look, we all have the tendency to be assholes every once in a while, especially you, Mark.
Especially you. You're quick for me, Scott. You got there ahead of me.
I'm just kidding. But these people are, it's a living philosophy. It's a living practice. And they're just these balls of light, whether they're in front of people teaching or not. And I think it's just such an indication that the work works.
Right. There's an integrity to that. There's a trust of like, okay, this person's like when I'm having lunch with Bonnie and Don and just seeing who they are as people when the cameras are off, it's like, okay, there's something that works here that gives me trust in the teachings. And also just as an organizer, Scott, life's too short. Like, I don't know about you, but there's a couple of people I haven't invited to Embodiment conferences. I just went, I don't need that. I don't care if they're famous. I don't need that. So for me, it's as an organizer, if you're cat herding this many people to keep your sanity, it's pretty important, right?
Yeah, it's important. And it's a good, and like you were saying, the fact that we can recognize, because I've known some of these people for a long time, and I have to say that I've seen their transformational processes through delving into this type of work. I mean, even for myself, I think I would like to think, you'll have to let me know, Mark, but
less of an asshole.
Less of an asshole, yeah, less of an asshole.
A little bit less every day.
Little bit at a time. I'm a work in progress.
Chip it away. Block of asshole that is my personality. A little bit every day.
Yeah, and I just watching how this deep work really transforms people into more. It just feels like they had the capacity to be in deeper relationship, and I'm certainly, that's one of my biggest interests, is how do we deepen and deepen and deepen the interconnection between all of us to really heal these ruptures within ourselves and between us.
Heal the ruptures. Sometimes I feel like the best feedback for us is like close friends and family who we're not asking. Like I did 6 months of like extra level, high intensity trauma work and body work 3 times a week, therapy twice a week. I was doing TRE every day. And after 6 months, I said to my wife, I said, so, I've been doing all this work and, hopefully it's made a big difference. You noticing anything? And she said, yes, you seem a little more relaxed. It is quite nice. Really? That's it? But equally, it was like, okay, this is someone I know is going to tell me she's Ukrainian. That's why she speaks that way. I knew someone that would tell me the truth. But it's like, okay, well, that sounds positive, So what do you hope people to get out of this summit, Scott? Like often there's these summits and it's like, whoa, big deal on the internet, summit, flashy names. And, everyone's a bit summit fatigued. And it's like, I've actually put time aside in my diary for this, not just as a speaker, but there's lots of people like Reverend Angel and Ray and all sorts of people I want to listen to. So I blocked out some time, which at the moment is possible. I mean, you've got kind of lucky with the timing, haven't you? But it's, what do you want people to get from this? What do you want people to really take away?
I think I want people, well, right now with what's happening, I think my initial intention is not so far off, but, I put it in the week of Earth Day for a reason, that I think that the process of reconnecting to our essential nature is the process of deep healing.
Yeah.
And our essential nature, again, is that primary language of felt sense, that, our essential nature as that you are my essential nature and I'm my essential nature. And that sense of community. I mean, I think that having community right now is everything. It is our resource. It is our anchor. It is the place to which healing happens. So there's a phenomenon called collective stress or collective trauma, where we're all in the same phenomenon together. So there's less co-regulatory processes that are happening, which is a problem. So, you might go see a therapist, but the reality is that therapist is going through the same shit that you are.
Right.
Even if they have more skills, let me tell you, it's hard for them too. The same yoga teacher that's teaching you to take deep breaths is going through it right now too. So we're in this together, which presents some challenges, which it was what happens in collective stress, or we could call it collective trauma. And so going through a process together that is healing and doing it in a community setting where you get to see other people start to settle in their bodies again, to come home, to feel safe again. And it's through that recognition collectively that I'm feeling safer and you're feeling safer that we start to deactivate collective stress or collective trauma. it's not as easy as going just individual therapy or individual processing. We need to recognize and see collective release, collective healing in order to release that.
So there is a collective stress right now. It could be a collective trauma for some. And people may have time at home. Not everyone, but I know people have kids, people are still working, not everyone, but some of us may have a bit more time to watch this, which is great. And I've heard people saying, hey, I'm spending too much time online. And it's like, more that you're spending too much time online in environments which aren't nurturing, like on Facebook, seeing bad news and, trolling and all this. Whereas what we've experienced with these conferences before is the way we do them is quite particular, that they're live generally, and that there's breakout rooms where you can really connect to people. And that's an entirely different thing than just having some big corporation throw recordings at you and say, here's a clever person you should listen to. Because it's really in the moment, and there is that potential for connection. And actually, I'd almost warn people. I'd say, listen, this if you do these summits the way we do them, they're way deeper than you might expect. There is a potential for a healing there. There is potential for deep connection with people around the world, which is not just like watching a video. It's way more live than that. It's way more juicy than that. And I really hope this summit is a nurturing thing for a lot of people. That's going to be just a positive influence, just beam straight into their houses when they might be stuck in them.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely one of the intentions. It's just to create a nurturing, supportive place for us all just to get together and connect. And through what will be most of our passion and love, which is yoga, and which is just such a beautiful thing to connect through right now.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it? Having fun, people learning stuff. That's my idea of a good life. So, right.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you, Mark, for being such being a sponsor and a partner in this summit. It's your guidance and your wisdom with it is really been instrumental. So thank you for all of that.
You're welcome, Scott. I get these texts late at night from you because you're in Australia, and I would try to WhatsApp you before I go to bed with some voice messages of me sounding like I'm half dying of COVID, giving you top tips. I mean, there's the conference we've been a few times now. This is our fourth event we've been involved with. So there's a certain experience there. I hope Danielle has been helpful as our Zoom wizard. Yeah. You're a pro, man. I think this is going to be the best produced one of all of them, just in terms of your level of professionalism and how you put this together. So any idea of how many you might be expecting now? Any sense of the scale of this?
I mean, well, first we have about 40 teachers in that summer. It will be between 40 and 50 teachers, which is quite special. And it will probably end up being between 20 and 30,000 people that come
very cool. Summit. Very free to all as well, right? We should say. So normal model we run, which is free to all, and you can buy the recordings if you want. So please do buy the recordings to help Scott. He's put a lot of money into this, but basically free to everyone, which is just a beautiful thing that we've found this model which makes it accessible, but it's still viable as a business. So like that to me is there's so few things in life that are totally free, and yet the people running them can still turn a little profit as a business for their efforts. Like that is a beautiful model, I think. Yeah.
I mean, especially what was really, again, one of the intentionalities, as you were asking, is like accessibility of this material. These teachers, and, they're really well established. They're honing their craft for a long time, and they haven't all been in one place like this before. And to make it free and accessible for more and more people to dive into this stunningly beautiful, impactful, powerful work, is everything.
And people are getting used to Zoom now. When we first did the Embodiment Conference in 2018, people were like, oh, you can't do embodiment online, and what the hell is Zoom? And I'm not used to being online, and it feels weird. People are Zooming every day now, right? It's a verb. So it's like, this is so much easier for everyone, so much deeper, so much. The teachers are getting better at teaching online because most teachers have now done Zoom classes. It's kind of like we're a little ahead of the curve a couple of years ago, but it does seem like now's the time for it, both in terms of need and the technology and people being ready for it. So good luck, sir. I will see you. I'll be there pretty much every day in some form or another, probably participant most days. Yeah, and where do people find it if they're interested in this? They want to sign up. We'll get this podcast out fairly quick. Where do people go?
It's embodiedyogaSummit.com, and there's a really active Facebook group with several thousand people chatting, connecting, and then one of the things we'll start doing in April is actually offering some free Zoom classes that will lead up to the summit itself.
Great.
So we have some teachers lined up for that as well.
Embodied Yoga Summit has got 2 M's in. If you're as bad at spelling as I am, I'm just checking it on the internet. SUMMIT, embodiedyogaSummit.com. Beautiful website. You can see all the other teachers there. There's teachers we didn't mention, actually, like Betsy Politin from the Trauma World.
Yeah.
That's Professor
Patty Townsend.
Very good.
Patty Townsend. Eleanor Criswell, who is Thomas Hanna's wife.
From Hannah Somatics.
Yeah, from Hannah Somatics. So, and probably one of the very first people to look at the intersection of somatics and yoga. T.S. Eliot, Buffy Owens, Tracy Stanley. Yeah, a lot of phenomenal teachers.
Wow, there's so many I'm going to ask you for an introduction to for the Embodiment Conference, dude. I'm looking at this. Let's say we haven't got this one. What the hell? You've got everyone. This is a great list. This is a great list.
Thank you. Okay. We're adding a few tomorrow too. So, like I said, Sally Kempton will be on there, and then a few more very special guests will be announced very soon.
Well, if I die of COVID, you can have my slot, okay, dude? So, okay. I've got an appointment. I'm going to go in 5. I've got an appointment with my doctor, a phone appointment. So, hopefully I'm on the mend now, though. But Scott, this has been awesome. You are a doctor. You're a spiritual healing doctor for the world. I take it back what I said. And this is the nicest you've ever been to me. So I should definitely record all our conversations in the future and make them public, just so we're more polite to each other. Brother,
this is how we'll interact for the rest of our lives.
Forever,
we'll just
publicly,
forever. We'll just publicly.
Long may the romance continue. This has been a really fun hour. I imagine the conference is going to be epic. So that's embodiedyogaSummit.com. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/embodiment podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So please go there. On the embodiedfacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. If most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodiedfacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment Podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodiedfacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook there. Bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you.